Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Okay, we can get started. I'm Venki Ganti. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Kamal Karlapalam from Indian Institute of Information Technology. He has contributed over the past couple of decades to a variety of areas like data mining, data warehousing, even multi-agent systems, workflows, and now he's currently interested in contracts, and we'll hear some of his recent work on this particular topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Venki. And it's my pleasure to be here and give this talk. I got into this area from the workflows point of view. So I was doing these workflows, and then we were looking at cross-organizational workflows and how we can basically extract some components of the workflows for inter-organizational or cross-organizational applications. Then we came across these electronic contracts, and this turned out to be an area which is pretty much fertile for different kinds of work and opens up a lot of interesting issues. So in the agenda, we'll start with what a little bit about electronic contracts, then the modeling. And one of the key things that I would like to emphasize here is from the notion of a contract to its actual enactment and production environment. How do we go about, and how do we use workflow technologies to some extent to support this? So one aspect of it is the data mining aspect that comes in, or text mining, where you talk about extracting concepts from contract documents, and some form of either semi-automated or user-enabled or end-user-enabled contracts to workflows mapping that you need to do. And a third most important component that we look at is the closure. So in what happens is a company signs large number of contracts, and many of these contracts you don't know whether they have been closed, whether they have been completed, and they are in this, many of them could be in twilight zone. So therefore, how do we look at the commitment and payments, which is actually the amounts that you pay for various deliverables that you do within a contract? So how does the commitment and payments, they both interact? So there is the age-old definition, which is a contract is an agreement between two or more parties, especially that is written and enforceable by law. Written in the sense like you can look back, you can keep a copy, and they are consistent, and then and you can go to a lawyer or a judge and say that this person is supposed to do this deliverable and he has not done it, and therefore I am going to sue that person. Recently, Wikipedia also talks about promise and agreement. The key aspect here is breach of which is recognized by the law, and legal remedies are provided. So these two, that means lawyers make use of these contract clauses and various other things to pursue cases and to actually come up with a report to say that how much liable a organization or a customer is. So one of the key issues is, why are the contracts even there? Contracts are there because they give you rights. So for example, if there is a contractor who is repairing the highway, then unless they sign a contract, they can't dig on that particular highway. So you get rights to actually do the work. So without a contract, you don't get any rights. And within organizations, it is one which regulates the behavior among organizations. So for example, the FDA might say that a company which is trying to do some drug design and drug testing, these are all the things that it should provide by the law, and the FDA should take care of certain aspects of it before the drug can be put into the market. So it has to be a set of obligations that are fulfilled between parties, refused or waived as future events occur. So if in the early part of the drug testing, you can say FDA might come up and say, no way, it doesn't go anywhere. So, or it may say some new obligations have to be met because of the potency of the drug and so on. So let's look at some contract. This is a part of a 100-page contract text document. This is relating to a specific aspect of taxes and payments. The highlighted parts are interesting in the sense like there are pointers like clause A of schedule A of the contract, entitled to receive the contract price. So you need to know where you can extract this contract price and then link it up with it. Payments against delivery certificates, acceptance certificates. So the system should know what an acceptance certificate is, who gives that acceptance certificate, the workflow behind the acceptance certificate. The payments will be made by the purchaser only after satisfying the satisfactory completion of each milestone as stipulated in system's requirement document referred in schedule B. So this again somebody has to actually support that. Here is another contract which talks about change management form. This is basically a procedural, like the kind of FDA example that I gave, is that in order to for a company like Satyam to do some change management for some particular organization, they have to follow these set of processes. Even in health insurance, you go for health insurance and then you are hospitalized, then the health insurance essentially says within 24 hours you should do this, within 48 hours you should submit this, before you meet some doctor you should get this clearance. And if you don't do any of those things, the health insurance company might say, no way, I'm not paying you anything. So therefore, the procedural aspects are quite embedded within a contract document, and extracting that is a big challenge. Here is another one which talks actually about the payment, and if you are doing, if the supply of goods by the failure to supply the goods by the time specified on the order will make supplier liable for unconditional liquidated damage of 0.5% per week, subject to a maximum of 10%. So this has to go into some application, it has to go into some workflow, somewhere it has to be there, so that you know that this has to be conformed. So there is a lot of these nitty-gritty issues that have to be taken care of and has to be supported. How do we do now? We have an application designer who looks into it, who looks at these requirements, and we have silos where each of these contracts are separately done, each of these aspects, maybe this aspect is done by one software, this aspect is done by another software, and they don't really talk to each other. So therefore, you need to have an integrated view of all these vertical applications. So what we do is we don't really, this is the complete life cycle. Basically, this is the initial stages. Do I want to do business with you? Then you say that, okay, what kind of business do we want to do, and let's have a contract. Then this is the actual stage wherein all these nitty-gritty details with lawyers are written up. And after that comes the contract enactment and contract monitoring. Now currently in most organizations, this is done by the applications software division of that particular organization, maybe using some workflow management systems, maybe something like Microsoft Project, or some documentations which goes the email oriented, Lotus oriented solutions, and it is all embedded in those kinds of softwares, but not as a separate e-contract management system. I'm not saying it is not being done. It is being done, but we are not having an integrated view. So I want to evangelize that we need to have an integrated view for this. So we'll go into the modeling aspect of contracts. So if you drill down and find out what is the core component of contracts, you can say contracts have parties. That is, the organizations are people involved in the business process. It can be Microsoft, it can be with a caterer who is supplying food for the Microsoft, it can be the activities. The food should be available by 10:30 in the morning for the tea or coffee session, and if it is delayed by 15 minutes, then the caterer is liable, right? And the activities, somebody is checking up, has it come by 10:45 in the morning? And then there are clauses. The coffee should be of two kinds, decaffeinated and caffeinated, and it should be of sufficient quantity to serve 250 people who are there. right? Multiple coffees, right? So, and so on. So, these clauses have to be done, and the whole table must be cleared by 11:15 a.m., right? And you put in these clauses. And over a period of time, you can also have these contracts that can be, which are already in place to be renegotiated. So, for example, I can have a contract with Office Depot to supply me stationery, and then I say that, okay, in January of this year, I'll say that I want to renegotiate the price for which I am taking the notebooks or something. There is a notion of commitment and transactions that is in the contract, the payment transactions, the delivery transactions that done, exclusions, that is this particular contract so since this particular customer is a privileged customer, I exclude him from these clauses, right? So, for example, if you are looking at car rental things, I may exclude some clauses for you. Authorization, who is authorized to this contract, and arbitration. Arbitration and jurisdictions, they both come when the contract fails. That is, who is going to arbitrate, who is going to actually resolve this conflict between I delivered this and the other person saying you did not deliver that. And then, of course, the court or the jurisdiction where it has to be fought. So, if you look at the clauses, clauses are of different kinds. Obligations, these state what the parties involved should do, thus resulting in deliverables and criteria for quality of service. These are the quality of service parameters. Payments, we have seen certain payment clauses which can be very intricate and so on. I'll talk about payments a little bit more. Penalties, if I don't deliver on my obligations, what are all the penalties that I need to have? Permissions, what parties are allowed to do, how much they have to do. Prohibitions, what the parties are not supposed to do. For example, a building contractor cannot have workers not wearing hard hats, otherwise it's illegal for them to do that. So, therefore, you should prohibit them from doing that. So, e-contract is a contract model specified, executed, controlled, monitored by a software system, like a database system does so many things with respect to data. This is a software system that does with respect to contracts, and all or a large number of activities are carried out by the software system. There is a human involvement, there is a system involvement in managing contracts. So, if you look at the contract document, they are fairly structured. I mean, if you look at, you go to your Microsoft Lawyer and pick up some 20 contracts, and you will find they are fairly structured. They are numbered, there are some clauses, there are some generic clauses which are there. A good way of finding this out is to look at Amazon returns policy, and you will find that it is a contract that you are signing when you buy a book, right? They are from the perspective of formatting and semantics. So, some semantics are like government regulations, some legalese that you don't have to worry about it. Some semantics are actually pertaining to that particular contract in terms of payments, in terms of quality of service that you are providing. It can be viewed in different contexts while you are composing, printing, visualizing, signing, and so on. So, this itself is a fairly good challenge for some people to how do I present the contract documents to lawyers as well as to the project managers who are actually working on that particular contract. They both need two different views, but some interrelated common information. Consists of standard elements. So, for example, the housing, so if you are renting an apartment in Seattle, then there is a standard contract that you sign, and then there you just say per month rent is so and so forth and so on. So, there can be that, and some individual extensions so can be there. So, for you, since you are having air conditioning, we will charge you more, or we have this requirement for you. It needs to be exchanged, manipulated in collaborative session, is signed by attaching signatures. These days, I agree is a good enough for signature. So, you have parties, activities clauses, they can have subcontracts. For a housing contract, I can give plumbing to somebody, electric things to somebody, payments. Most of the contracts in organizations, they have a budget attached to it, so that if you are over the budget or under the budget, those issues come in. It needs synchronization across all of them and has a duration. And these are some additional metadata that you deal with the contracts. So, when you go into modeling part of the contracts, contracts being documents have to be read to understand the intricate details. Somebody has to go through that. A human being typically goes through it and picks up the various aspects of it. They have structure and some implicit relationships among concepts. So parties, activities, clauses, and payments. Conceptual models have for long have been able to help to visualize and communicate some of the interrelationships between various entities and various concepts which are there. And metamodels at their simplest level act as templates for a conceptual data model. They form a template which can be filled in and it can be done. The key idea here is this is text to model is a very interesting open area. That is, I have given you a text document and then I have some intricate template of relationships that I am going to show you. How do I pick up things from this text and fill in this template with fairly reasonable accuracy or with certain amount of accuracy or precision, and then some users come in and do the more intelligent work, and most of the mundane thing is taken care of by this particular software system. And I think this is a very open-ended research area. Contracts is just one example for it. Healthcare, patient records and all that things is another application for this. So there can be many applications where you do this text to model kind of a thing. I have a template, I have text, how do I fill in? So here we have this template.
The model, in a sense, for a legacy contract, this could be useful. But would it be kind of more natural to go from model to text? So you have the model first, and then you generate a contract from that. That steps this issue of getting the right extraction.
That's a good question. See, when I said this piece of work, we are starting with after the document. Now, before the document, there is business exchange and also contract preparation. At that time, you might be doing some modeling, and then you might be actually coming up with those issues. So, wherein you can say, first I have a protocol and so on for the contract. So, you can think of that. So here is one particular meta model. So you have contracts, parties, clauses and activities, they are all related. A single party can be involved in multiple activities satisfying multiple clauses. A contract can have subcontract, which itself is also a contract. Parties have different roles. I am a lender, I am also a worker. So a bank is both giving the loan for that and is getting something constructed for itself. Clauses refer to themselves. Activities have clauses. There is some synchronization among them. There is a budget, and there are certain rules that are involved in this particular contract. So now the basic idea is, given a contract document, there can be many contracts, subcontracts that I need to fill in here, parties I need to fill in here, activities I need to fill in here, and clauses. The easier part is just listing out the activities, listing out the clauses, listing out the payments. The harder part, or a more difficult part, is actually saying that this activity is related to this clause, is related to this payment. Those kinds of relationships is what you need to extract, and that is the key issue here, and that's a open problem. I mean, we haven't solved that, but it is an open problem, and it's something that we should be looking at. So here is a typical contract of buyer-seller. Buyer-seller contract has parties. Parties is buyer, seller and a bank. Activities are order of goods, shipment of goods, delivery of goods, transfer of funds between the buyer and seller. Clauses could be payments exceeds, delivery time is something, and delivery approval. And here are some rules that are there. So this is a part of the, we did some work on modeling rules in ER model way back, and we use parallelograms for showing the rules. And we can say goods damaged during shipment, goods not received, not sufficient balance, invalid account details, and so on. These rules can be also modeled. So when somebody looks at this particular diagram, they will be able to figure out what exactly is that contract talking about, or the main points of that contract. And they can, in future, they should be possible to click on this and look at the workflow associated with that, and so on. So meta models are actually provide a guided approach for conceptual modeling. Templates can be designed for specific domains. For shipping contracts, there is one template. For house rental contracts, there is another template. For these kinds of vendors, there is certain template. provide generality, allows reusability and extensibility. You can extend these models, the meta models. So there have been other approaches like Crossflow, Cosmos, and EREC is our approach for doing this. So the key thing is not the modeling part. I mean, I can do the modeling, I can fill up the model either by humans or by some software or some tools support. But the more interesting challenge is for a comprehensive solution for e-contract management. Given a contract, I need to deploy that contract in the realistic setting. So how do I go about doing that? So we did some preliminary work in this area, and I'll talk about that now. So the basic system starts with e-contract document, then we have a template filler, then we get activity clause specification. From there, we get workflow specifications and commitment specifications. When does the e-contract end? And then you have the Xflow enactment environment, and there is a commitment engine. So commitment specification and commitment engine, I won't talk about it in this, the details of this, but I'll talk a little bit about what kind of issues are there in commitment aspects. But we'll go through these phases in a step-by-step manner. And if you want to look at it from the architecture point of view, you have the contract document, you have a meta level where there is this ER meta schema, then there is a conceptual layer where you have the data model, the activity party clauses relationships, then you have activity commit diagrams which talk about when does the activity end and when does it commit, and then at the logical level you have databases, workflows and workflow instances which are actually supporting this contract. So you can think of both from the software point of view and also layering this software across things. The key thing that I want to put in here is that there might be already large number of systems here which do some amount of this work. Now this kind of a architecture helps you to compose these solutions which are already available to support under a single umbrella of contract document, and that is what I want to convey in this particular talk. That is, it is high time that we start doing this so that you get a comprehensive view of contract and where all it reaches in this organization and how it is actually enacted and supported. So you have a contract document which is plainly a text document. You have a template filler, uses named entity trigger and sentence classifier. We use the Rainbow toolkit, and then activity clause specification which can be done by humans and with some help from the system. So this is the easier part, getting the party names, person names, organizations, temporal references, places, payment quantities, percentages, all this, and then extracting those sentences which are related to this is the easier part. Yeah.
Asked, which is, why would you start with a passive document as against, a piece of software to define this contract and have the document as a bypass? I'm exactly repeating what Vivek said, because here you are first creating the document, then you are tagging it, and you are going to extract things from it. But if I gave you the right software, right, you just define the contract in a more active manner so that the software pieces fall out of it. You would identify what are the entities right away, as against when you are perfectly happy to say here are the parties.
Right.
And that sounds more kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, I think there is it's true that for some there are.
As it stands.
Right. Let me answer it in two ways. Okay. First way is if I have multiple organizations, I'm looking at large organizations like you are building an airport, okay, or your large number of entities, parties which are there. They may not have a single software on which they have to build all these things. Each one is individualized. They are saying that this is what my contract obligations are going to be, right? And it is finally somebody signs a book or a huge document which does that. So there is that class of things, right? Then there is, yeah.
So what you're saying is, since there's multiple parties to any contract,
right,
only one would be in the position of being able to generate it from their model because it's unlikely
Right,
that they're all
exactly.
sharing the same
The
modeling
same models,
framework,
yeah.
right? So the other parties all at least have to be able to read it and digest it as a document.
But that's what databases do. Databases give concurrent access to both parties, and then they work together and agree to something, right? I mean,
Right.
why is it the case that you can always generate a document. You can always look the current state of the contract, generate as an XML document and whatever. Okay, so
That's you see.
nothing prevents two organizations from using the same piece of software and maybe collaborating. I can put somebody's record and someone else can read that. I mean, this is no different, right?
It's a lack of standards, right? I mean,
Right.
that
Oh,
is-
yes.
So there are some efforts, I know, at least in the EU, there's a giant e-commerce effort.
In fact,
I
Surajit,
understand I'm not trying to say this is obvious and it is easy to do, none of that. I mean, but I'm saying is philosophically, is that the path we should walk or this is the path we should walk?
I think Surajit, the point is well taken in the sense like suppose if I have some XMLized version of this model, even after that I still need to do lot number of things and maybe some of them will become lot more easier. That's all. But the problem of contract management still arises. Okay, so it is the how much level of support and from where you are providing it. So there are these standard bodies which are trying to do that, which are trying to say that okay, we can come up with EBXML or some e-contract XML oriented standards. But then, as I was saying, some of these. Let me give you this example of say TCS. Okay. Now TCS signs huge number of contracts with their various partners, and some of these contracts are actually requests for proposals and the documents for that, and they are just Word documents which are actually exchanged, and from that you need to glean out. So now they have and the document by itself is collaboratively developed within the organization. Okay, but finally it is a document that is sent. And people say, I approve this document. And that's the legacy aspect of it. Now, for them to change over from to a modeling, there is a change in perception that has to take place. Okay. So, if I am able to move forward to a level where I say that everything is modelized and I can, just drag and drop things and say, this is my contract, well and good. I'm very happy with it. Even after that, I can do a lot of things. But there are subtle reasons why you still want a document. The subtle reason is you can just say, I scratched this clause for you. You and I are talking across the table, we scratch some clauses, we add some things, we do things and we sign it off.
Vivek's point was the document is a view.
Right.
As against document being the code. The idea is that the code is actually an active, think about a program.
Right,
lack of a
exactly,
better word.
exactly.
And the document is a byproduct, which essentially captures the contract, is a representation that can be reviewed by common people.
Right.
But the creation, maintenance, versioning, changes are much better managed. if
By
you-
software. True. It opens.
offline.
Right, exactly. It's right. So therefore, these are the easier parts. So we had a pattern recognition module where we actually look at where we tagged actually the clauses, the activities, and the payment statements. And then we used both the negative and positive examples and tried to get a rainbow classifier to learn it. And we got something like 70% accuracy on new contract statements. But that's some way we could do that. So given such a contract statement, we could fill it up with these templates, like parties are so, dates are so much, places are this, the clauses are. So these are all actually sentences that we picked up from there. After these sentences, we can go back to the original contract and see if we have missed some things and drag and drop some parts of it into this. And this becomes a building block for the next steps. So from here, you can get into workflow specification, saying that this is the workflow that is supporting this aspect, this activity of a contract, or this workflow is actually going to say whether this clause is satisfied or not. So if it gives success, that clause is satisfied. If it gives failure, the clause is not satisfied. This is by humans. This is done by humans. With some amount of, you can think of a software that will do this, but it is tricky. It's not, because you need to say, I do this, then I do that. Some parts are missing from that.
The way to think about it as a contract, from that I somehow
Get this. Right.
I conceptually get this and then I write the program.
Right, exactly. But, yeah, go ahead.
So it sounds like then you would tend to do this in the repeated situation, so you're not so much wanting to analyze a particular contract as a certain pattern that's parameterized. In other
Right.
words, one of these, word forms that gets filled in for individual contracts.
Exactly.
Then you have a corresponding workflow that works for a whole class of contracts that fit a certain pattern. Is that the
Exactly,
kind
you
of
can leverage
situation?
that. You can leverage it in that manner. Right. The first time you have to do it, you have to do all the process. Later on, you can amortize it over various set of contract instances. Yes. Then you get into a XML definition of the workflow, and then you can give it to a software that will actually enact it. And then you have events. We use the Snoop language to say that this particular clause is satisfied, therefore now I need to make this payment and so on. So those kinds of events will actually run the other aspects of the contract. Okay. And this was the rehash of what we did in this thing, starting from here to enacting the contracts. Okay, so the contracts modeling and enactment is one part of it. The other part of the work is relating to the closure part of the contract. How do I close this contract? How do I do? In case of certain kinds of contracts, you have lot more sense of activities. So you are doing a activity. You don't know whether that activity is successful or it has failed, whether it is partial or it is completed, and even if it has failed, then what else you can do. So these things become very ambiguous, and in a contract kind of a setup, you need a mechanism to model these things and support the closure of this contract. At some point of time, you should say, I'm done with this contract, now I'm going to start off with something else. So how can organizations keep track of done contracts? That is, it is no longer in that twilight zone of, yeah.
So far, why is it not just an application of information extraction techniques?
It is an application. We basically use the existing information extraction techniques. We didn't develop any new information extraction techniques. But
To contracts that you
it gives us the domain knowledge to do some things easier. So I know that this kind of sentences actually talk about clauses. Okay, so that kind of domain expertise we put in there, but nothing great there, nothing. The key aspect there that I wanted to bring out is text to model. In the sense, like I have some set of templates where there are multiple things related, and I have text documents. How do I fill in very nicely? And that's the nice research challenge. It's a nice, wonderful problem to handle, and it has beauty in it to look at. It's got some nice aspects. Yeah.
It sounds like then, from the tech side, you're looking at clauses, but really that's a reference point.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that's important in your model is commitments that you're trying to monitor in terms of relevant events to see if they're fulfilled or unsatisfactorily fulfilled. And then there's a reference to the clause, because that's the point at which you arbitrate or that you go back to the other party when there's a problem.
Yes, we'll come to that. That's exactly what we are going to talk about. Okay, so let's start with a contract for building a house. Okay, so if you look at the parties, there is a customer, there is a builder, a bank, and an insurance company in all that. As per customer specifications, some activities like plumbing and electrical work is subcontracted. Customer gets mortgage from the bank. The house is insured comprehensively for market value, right? And then several bi or trilateral contracts may exist for building the house. And this whole thing is one single contract. From my end point of view, I'm just buying a house. I don't care about all these subcontracts that are happening around. And I want that house to be satisfactory, and I'm done with it. And if something happens, I am taken care of. Right? So this is the environment that we look at. So this itself is fairly complex, and the initial specifications of the requirements and later verification of the execution with respect to compliance of the clauses are very tedious and complicated. How do I know that they are supposed to use 2-inch pipe for water? How do I know that they have used really 2-inch pipe for water and it has of this quality, it is fire resistant and so on and so forth, right? I mean, yeah, you have to break the house. Exactly. Or you need somebody to certify it and then you get to that. So somebody inspects that to say that it has been done. Right. So it is not trivial and you don't want to look into all these nitty-gritty details, but you need the onus is there on somebody that it has been done. And that is the very key important thing. Who owns that, who carries that buck to do that is the critical aspect there. So they may be electronic or interdependent with other activities and clauses. They may be executed by different parties. The plumbing is done by one and there is the electrical wiring which is done by other. They both are working together and the wall is being constructed by the third person. And they are long lasting and the outcomes of their executions may be unpredictable. Okay. So the key issue here that we want to say is the e-contract should reflect both the specification and execution aspects of the activity at the same time. What are the outcomes of the execution, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and how does it drive this particular contract. They both are equally important, where the former is the compositional logic of the contract and whereas the later is the transactional properties of the contract saying that this is done or not. So you need precise specifications of activities, mapping them to deployable workflows and providing transactional support for their execution. These are the key ingredients. So if you look at the transactional properties, we talk about atomicity and commitment, and either everything gets done or nothing gets done, and you want to most probably go for successful completion. That is the commitment. I don't want plumbing not to be done in the house, right? So it has to be done. Okay. So and then when you want to do the recovery, if things don't work, then you want to be either compensate that or you retry the execution, and these can involve various sophisticated interactions. Like for an activity, complete and partial executions might be compensated. Both successful and unsuccessful executions might be compensated. We'll see examples of this. Even committed transactions may be retried. Retrying may mean, in addition to re-execution, adjusting the previous execution. You do it in some ways. Activities may be compensated or retried at different times relative to the executions of other activities. So they play around.
Is there anything specific here? Rather than the kind of work that goes on in the usual workflow management scenario? Is this typical workflow or is there something particularly novel here that makes it different?
Yes, it is in the way that both compensation and retrying work together, and the notion of weak commitment that I'm going to talk about. Okay. So suppose now these examples are, though they deal with a house kind of an environment, you can think of a modern business similar examples. A pipe is fixed correctly as specified by the contract, so it is committed. Okay. As far as the plumber is concerned, it is done. Later, while constructing a mini wall, the pipe breaks. So as per the clause, any damage or loss of the goods during the construction of the house is responsibility of the builder, and the builder has to repair or replace at no additional cost. So this committed thing has to be retried and reset up. So you have to redo that whole thing, and as far as your contract life cycle and everything does, you know that this has been committed and it has been redone at some later point of time. In the process of repayment of the bank loan, if a check is bounced for some reason, the customer has to pay penalty in addition to the actual amount. You are again compensating for the things that has gone wrong. So each activity must be closed at some time, so it has to be done. So activities have to be done. So that is, on closure, no execution related to that activity would take place. So that means it is done, finished, over, and it is not looked at again. So activity here could be could be like plumbing, for example, that we have done. Right.
So then the pipe was done.
Right.
And later on it broke.
Right.
Right. So what point was it closed? I mean,
Exactly, we'll come to that. Exactly, that example we'll again revisit, and then I'll tell you where exactly, where it works out, okay. So, the closure could be done on complete or incomplete execution, on successful or failed execution. So, you can, when you do it, you might have different possibilities that happen. So, on closure of the contract activity, so the whole e-contract can be treated as an activity, and it is composed of various workflows which are there underneath it, and now you can actually say that this is successful, this is failed, and then how do you retrace back and do various things. So, that was the complete picture that we will get into. So, this may involve settlement of payment and other issues between the parties. So, e-contract closure is referred as e-contract commitment. That is, we use e-contract commitment logic to refer the entire logic behind the commitment of the various activities of the e-contract and closure of the activities of the e-contract. So, that is, everything is done. So, this whole hierarchy of things is completely done. So, when you start off with this, you need to start off with some notion of a composition. In the sense, like my e-contract consists of these 5 parties, around 20 activities, and which are actually in a workflow. And now I need to say, I need to have a formal model to say that how this whole thing gets done. So, you have to start with something basic. So, you have this notion of basic activities, those which cannot be decomposed into smaller ones. They may be electronic or non-electronic, some of it done by humans, I approve kind of a things. And we would like their execution to be atomic, that is, either they are completely executed or not. These are the ground rules on which we are basing our solution. Okay. So, our incomplete executions are unavoidable, and we consider them also. So, each activity is executed under some certain constraints, like who can execute, when it can be executed, which executions are acceptable. So, for example, when I am laying a road, I need to ensure that there is enough friction on that particular road to ensure that it is satisfied, right. So, a complete or incomplete execution satisfying constraints specified at the time of execution is called successful termination. The constraints are specified in terms of ST predicate, okay, and the execution which does not satisfy ST predicate is a failed termination. So, I need to say that these things, this particular logical expression has to be true for this particular activity to be done. How do I come up with that is a different issue, and the related aspects assigned to it. But as a model, this is the clean model, which says that this is the logical expression that has to be satisfied. So, going to the painting of wall, it is incomplete while being painted, okay. Complete after painting is finished. So, once I have finished the painting, it is complete. S termination, if painting job satisfies the ST predicate, like there is one coat underneath and one coat on top of it, like a white primer and then a color, and no smudges on the ceilings and various other things, then this is a paint job, it is done well. So, these are the kinds of predicates that you need to come up with to say that it has been done properly. And this is where event management becomes very critical in a business sense. Like for this kind of a predicate with various clauses, one event can come from one system, another event can come from another system, and you have to wait for all these events to occur to finally say, yes, this is done. Okay. So, that is where the event management aspect comes into play. The constraints may change, that is, the ST predicate of an activity may change because over a period of time some governmental regulations have changed or something else has changed. So, so that is again a beauty of this particular thing is that my ST predicates I can modify them as per the needs of the contract at the execution time. Specification time, these were the constraints, but the execution time, these are the constraints. So, therefore, it gives me a very dynamic solution for this. So, I might say that this wall, there was a earlier there was a dark blue color on this, now I want to go into light yellow. So, I need 2 primers, so as to remove that blue effect or something, right, in addition to one undercoat. So, such changes may invalidate the previous execution and then the execution needs to be adjusted. So, one way of adjusting these earlier executions is compensation. So, compensation is to nullify the effects of the execution. You have done something and you want to go back and do something else. So, options are absolute compensation if possible, ignoring the original execution and compensating, running and compensating activity. I have given you, I have written a check for much larger amount than what I was supposed to do. I get back a compensation for something else. Compensation may be constrained by time, like I need to return something by 7 days. For an activity, some executions may not be compensatable. This again goes back to the specification environment and execution environment. In my specification environment, I might say that as per the contract, our consultants will fly from Chicago to Detroit. But at the time of buying the tickets, it may say that they are generally supposed to buy fully refundable tickets, but none of them are available, or something is not available, or they are supposed to buy non-refundable tickets and only fully refundable tickets is available. Then you need to buy it and then you need to go. So therefore, so compensatability property is attributed to an execution of an activity, but not to the activity itself. That particular instance of execution you are compensating. So, retriability is the ability to get complete execution satisfying possibly new ST predicate. So, what happens is you came up with this and then you realize, so let us say electrical wiring. So, you are supposed to do electric wiring like this, but then you realize that if you do it in this manner, then that electric wiring will have interference with respect to the cable wire or some other wire which has gone in there. So, now therefore, you need to satisfy and you need to redo that, and then you need to reorganize it so that it does not have that conflict, right. So, retrying may involve partial or full rollback and then a re-execution. Retriability is also time independent, and some executions of activities may be retriable, some of them may not be. Again, retriability is attributed to an execution of the activity and not an activity itself, okay. And retriability and compensatability are orthogonal. So, when you talk about going back to the model, you say that the basic activities when they start off, they are both compensatable and retriable. I can compensate this activity, maybe it is possible, maybe not, but from the point of view, I can say it is with that basis you can start. It becomes non-compensatable, but is still retriable. Then it becomes non-compensatable and non-retriable. So, this is the levels at which it reaches. So, an execution may be compensated or retried several times. Execution may be retried several times in this, and an execution may remain in state A forever, and similarly in state B in forever. An execution in state B is weakly committed, and the execution in state C is strongly committed. Okay. So, therefore, that plumbing example it's in the state B, they have done it, I have not finally taken up the house. So, therefore, I can retry it because it broke and then I have to fix it.
So, what is the formal definition of non-compensatable? Because I can always break the pipe, right?
But no, but non-compensatable in the sense that it cannot go back to null execute. Yeah, you can do that in some cases, exactly. Yeah. But then it is still compensatable and retriable scenario. You are not in this scenario, right? So if you look at it, the stages of an activity, you start with it. Execution is in progress. Then the execution is stopped, and you are checking what is the status. When you look at the status, it can be complete or incomplete failed termination, it can be S termination, or incomplete but weakly committed S termination. And then finally, when you, so here you can retry it multiple times, and finally you get into the states which are closed strongly committed S termination, or closed non-null F termination where you have to do something. I have done partial road and then my contract I can't do anything more. So now it's your business. The lawyers come in and they start doing something else at that point of time. Or null termination. I haven't even started anything. It is as if like I have given you back the clean slate. Now this is up to you, right? So this a complete S termination. So here this is the explanation of what happens in these loops. I won't go into the details of these two aspects. Same thing here. So the final state of execution is closure with 3 possible states: null, non-null, complete or incomplete F termination. It is completed, but it is not what I wanted, or it is what it is incomplete. And finally, I got exactly what I wanted. And I paid money to Amazon to deliver me this book. They delivered me this book. It is complete, and I am done. Or I asked Amazon to deliver me a book, but some pages are missing. They delivered the book, but it's not the thing. So I need to do something else with respect to that. All right. So this whole work is actually a Kupis 2007 paper, and we have a composition model there, and where we talk about quite a lot of issues with respect to sequence of activities and tree structure activities, composing activities, and how this weakly committed executions and the successful executions interact. How do you go about all those details? I am not into it, but this is a paper that you can look at if you want further details. Okay. But so this is about commitment, but the key aspect is the payments. So when you talk about commitment, you need to make payments. So you have done the plumbing, so you need to make. Suppose you are doing not doing a bulk house thing, but you are getting it done by various plumbers and electricians, and you are paying piecemeal to each one of them. Then you have a lot of payment issues, right? So payments are made to parties constrained by clauses, and they are meant for and are closely related to execution of activities. That means the successful completion of activities, the failed completion of activities, and so on. So one should be able to ascertain that activities have been executed satisfactorily to deserve the payment. So this is an underlying system. So it doesn't matter how you define your contract, but when you are defining your contract, you need to put in these hooks to say that this part is done, so this payment has to be made. Now currently it is actually a kind of interorganizational workflow between the accounts department and the other department, and there is all these events that float around between them for a payment to happen. Both these require good understanding of execution states of the activities, and hence execution state of the e-contract. So we need to identify the execution states of activities in terms of transactional, so compensatability, retriability, and commit properties, and the related states to costs of payments of the activities. Now, the issue that comes up is when you compensate or when you retry, who pays for it? What is the cost? Now, those are some gray areas which may not be included in the contract document. And therefore, you need to get somebody else to arbitrate on that, or you just discuss across the table and decide on that. So a cost is associated with S termination of an activity. If it is successfully terminated and everything, this is what I pay you, right? So different S terminations may cost different amounts depending upon the environment and the way it which done, which clauses. So I might have a disjunction of clauses. It depends upon which disjunct is satisfied, I pay according to that, right? So an activity AI that is not executed may cost nothing. If executed but compensated, cost of AI may be non-zero, but payment may be zero because I have not done anything, right? So the re-execution may incur additional costs. Therefore, the final value of cost AI may be known only after the end of the execution. So if I have re-executed it, I need to know. So if re-execution costs are not charged to C, then payment of AI may be known on weak commitment of the things. So at the weak commitment stage, I know what I need to pay, even though I'm not satisfied with that or whatever. So in context of payments, there are two aspects. One is the enabling of payments and then making of payments. Making of, so for each activity, either a single or multiple or partial payments may be enabled at various states of execution. we go back to our contracts. You have clauses, you have activities, and you have parties, and you have payments. Now, payments, I can make multiple payments for a single activity, or I can make a payment for multiple activities. I can make a payment based on satisfaction of one clause or many clauses, and so on and so forth. They are highly interrelated, and therefore managing this logic within the system is a very interesting sub area, and it's still very open. Not much work has gone in, and it's a so the commitment aspects and the payment aspects become very critical. Suppose if you are doing software as a service paradigm, and then you have implicit contracts with all your customers, then how does this whole thing work around? You know, and those some interesting issues will definitely come up there. Payment can be fully or partially refundable or non-refundable. So you need a payment monitoring system that should keep track of state of termination, payment enabled, payment made points, and the amounts for each activity. So at the end, what we essentially did is we wanted to provide an integrated view of e-contracts, and modeling to enactment to commitment to payments to closure path. That is exactly what we wanted. So see the end-to-end understanding of the whole thing. Now, there are a lot of open issues, open problems, we can build upon it, but this end-to-end understanding is extremely critical if you want to solve this problem. A simple prototype system to show viability of the idea. Existing solution standard systems can be plugged in to support an integrated view. So most organizations already are doing this. They have this path, but they are all individual silos, individual software systems that are supporting different components with human intervention, email, Lotus Notes, and things like that going on. Maybe it's time to look, having this e-contract view may help you to integrate things better, will help you to understand things better. Help stakeholders in different ways. So advantages are improved productivity, obviously, right? Things move faster, you know where your contract is. Accelerated contract life cycle, reduced risk and improved security. You know that everybody is doing the same thing in this contract, not different people are not doing different things. Increased profits and superior. This is a interesting data mining related work, in the sense like what I would like to do is I have this like Walmart. It has 100,000 contracts with its vendors who are supplying various products. I want to know which clauses are profit making, which clauses are not making profit, which are losing, where I am getting a lot of lawsuits and various other kinds of things. I would like to do that kind of work, and then I want to redo my contracts so that it is more profitable for me. Other people will also do the same, but at least I can chat it out, right? Better compliance enforcement. This is extremely critical because government regulations might say that you have to keep this data up to 5 years. After that, you are to destroy that data. You can't have that data, and you need to be able to show that, right? Electronic bookkeeping. This goes back to what you are saying, that you need to have the legal aspects are extremely critical, because what happens is I, as a project manager in TCS, I would like to have a window in front of me where I am looking at a contract thing. My lawyer who is in Bombay is also looking at it, and we are talking about how do we get out of this clause, and we work it out, and that is extremely critical. Authorizations, alerts and tracking is the key thing. So if you go back, you can say voluminous documents or voluminous models, if you want to use that word. Ambiguity and fuzziness of natural languages in legalese is fantastic. I mean, if you see the legal statements, they are mind-boggling in terms of their ambiguity. Managing and monitoring is human intensive, autonomous nature. Cross-checking for payments. Cross-checking for payments is a independent activity. You can take it up as a separate problem altogether. Like if I'm making a payment, are all the things that are supposed to be done for this particular payment done, right? Standard formats. Now there are some very good formats for doing this. Computer supported contracts and security. Handling all these aspects within a system is a fairly good challenge, and so I want to evangelize this notion of look at it as a contract. So there are two issues here. The CEO of a company might come and say to the lawyer, the chief legal officer, what is my liability among all the contracts that I have signed till now? Is it 100 million or 500 million? If all the clauses go wrong, then what is it my liability, right? That could be one thing. The other thing could be, what I am saying is, I can say instead of shareholder value, I can say contract value, which are the contracts which are making profit for me. I also like to see that a company has contracts with their employees do work for the company, and there is a value for that particular contract. You can even drill down to that particular level, right? So here are some things. A good starting point is the Internet Computing Spotlight article that we had in July. ER modeling, the basic model was in ER. Some more modeling work with enactment is here. I didn't talk about the whole aspect of contract evolution and template selection and so on. Those were in ER 2006. Active conceptual modeling is a new area that is coming up, where you can think of having executable conceptual models, and that would essentially work towards what you are trying to say. And the ER 2007, we did some deep modeling in the implementation. Commitment is in CUPIS this year, and payment is in SEC this year, last year, already 2009, I mean, okay. And we have been giving tutorials on this at various forums. Okay.
Any questions?
I already asked.
Yeah, we already asked a lot of
exactly.
questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for